We also played for you Will Anderson telling ESPN Radio his favorite visits were Houston and Detroit. Like the coaching staff, like the way that they would potentially use him, which is interesting because Detroit falls outside of the range of, I mean, you don't, if you're in the draft, the higher you get drafted, the more money you make. Yet he speaks glowingly of a team that might be the worst case scenario financially for him if he dropped all the way to 6, but he still seemed to like Detroit. Now, that doesn't mean Detroit wouldn't trade up for him, and perhaps they told him that. Lions have clearly done their homework on prospects that would likely need to be traded up to get in Will Anderson and C.J. Stroud, as they should. They're doing their due diligence. But I think Detroit trading with Arizona is something we could see 1 week from today.
We could definitely see it. And because I think there's definitely a path where the Lions could present an offer that would, I think, make Lions fans feel comfortable with what the offer is and maybe make Arizona feel comfortable with what the offer is. But there's also a territory where we can start to feel uncomfortable that maybe we're giving up too much, because I think Arizona is going to field offers that will be more impressive than what the Lions will offer.
They might be. In fact, I can't remember if it was ESPN or CBS Sports. One of them did a bunch of trade possibilities for the draft, and they had the Lions trading up to Arizona's spot at 3, giving up 6, their first second rounder.
So 6, 48.
And their third rounder.
And 81.
Yeah.
I would do that.
I would do that too. And you still pick at 18. You still have a second rounder. And you could walk away with Will Anderson. I mean, we'll go over your list later. 18 and the pick at 55. So if you're going to tell me Will Anderson, Bijan Robinson, Jack Campbell, Will Anderson, Osiris Torrance, Drew Sanders, I mean, that sounds to me like a pretty good top of the draft. I do like hoarding draft picks, though, because it seems like the teams that do best in the draft really just, it's a numbers game. The more draft picks you have, the better you do, because it is an inexact science.
Well, but now you got to start thinking about here, if teams are going to be, how many teams are willing to move up to 3 now? And we're going to get into the C.J. Stroud stuff, because rumors are swirling here a week before the draft. This is the season of misinformation right now.
Yep.
And people think he's going to start to slip here. So if you're trading up to 3, are teams no longer going to be interested to trade up for C.J. Stroud? Or if they're trading up, are they only going to be trading up for Will Anderson?
They could be. I mean, the C.J. Stroud stuff, I'm not buying into it. Look, I'm not a huge C.J. Stroud fan. I'm not a huge fan of this quarterback class. I feel like this quarterback class, I like next year's quarterback class way better. But as far as Stroud's concerned, it strikes me that this whole didn't show up to a Manning Passing Academy commitment that he had. I don't know. This feels like fabricated or overblown stuff that is floated out there to try and hurt his draft stock.
Yep. Yep. But I think people are looking. Look, this is why it's misinformation. There are people looking to bring somebody down or build somebody else up. It's I'm not sure what to think of this either.
Yep.
But there was some stuff last week that came out about C.J. Stroud, and he was difficult to coach.
Yeah. It wasn't that he was uncoachable. It was that he apparently asks a lot of questions and needs to be convinced of a way to do things. But
right.
All right, feedback coming in on the Will Anderson stuff. Somebody writes, and this is a response to you saying that getting somebody opposite Aiden Hutchinson isn't a huge necessity any longer. Gator, getting a quarterback is always needed. The Lions aren't good enough at it, no matter what you think about last season. Yes, it is a screaming need. Well, it's a need. I mean, they went from 29th in sacks to 16th in sacks. They went from no pressure to respectable pressure. And they did it with mostly young guys who might just be scraping the surface of what they can be. If you're going to take a chance and say, all right, here's a position that we are not going to address in the draft, edge rusher wouldn't be one that I'd be upset about. I mean, you're taking the chance that Houston's legit and over the course of an entire season is going to have double-digit sacks, that Aiden Hutchinson, the robo-rusher, is only going to get better, that having Romeo Okwara back and healthy and Charles Harris healthy, and guys are going to get hurt, but you hope it's not them, that those guys added to the mix increase pressure. Like, there's a lot of ways that just standing pat, they can come back and be better next year. If they ignore linebacker, that'd be a bigger problem for me. I'd like to see them address the linebacker position with some high draft capital. But
yeah, they had 39 sacks last year. They had 30 the year before. So they made a nice, healthy increase to go from 30 to 39. Would I expect more sacks this upcoming season? I would.
I would too.
Of course, if they were to get Will Anderson, I'd be very happy about that. But I just think if the same personnel should bring about more pressure on the quarterback. And here's the fine line with it. 39 was like middle of the pack. If they had a handful of more quarterback sacks, they'd be top 10.
Right.
Okay, that's how tight it is. There's a massive difference between being the number one team in the league, which was Philadelphia last year. Which
how many did they have?
They were way 70.
They're way out in front.
And number two is Kansas City with 55. So you can look at that and say how important it is to get to the quarterback because the top two teams are the teams who are playing for the Super Bowl. That being said,
pretty compelling argument.
Yeah, it is a very compelling argument. And I'm not saying that this isn't this is what I would do. I just find it ironic because I don't think it is the screaming position of need. I think the screaming position of need is defensive tackle.
Yeah, we're both in favor of trading up and getting Will Anderson.
Yeah.
Let's make that clear.
He's the number one prospect that I would take in the draft. If I had the first pick overall and you're forced to take it, I'm taking Will Anderson.
But if a position doesn't get addressed, if they don't add a defensive tackle or a linebacker, they probably need a running back, wide receiver. Like, there's some other positions that probably aren't going to get that much better without adding draft capital. A defensive end, edge rusher might get better without adding anybody.
Yeah,
better than it was a year ago is what I'm saying.
This is the shining example of don't be afraid to give up the good for the great.
No,
right?
and we're when Mel presented a mock last week with Will Anderson on the board at 6, our excitement was, I hope came through the speakers, but you actually turned to hostility because you got mad because you don't think there's
I don't think there's any way in hell he's going to be there at 6.